Well, hello, welcome back to my build log of this Barnstormer kit. So last video I finished up doing the monokote, and now I'm going to be moving on to sort of the assembly of the plane. So you know, sort of like, I guess what I would call the hard part, kind of building up the airframe and then covering it. That to me is probably the more difficult stuff in the build to do. But now we're kind of moving on to the sort of like the assembly of all the parts. Okay, so in this video, I'm gonna just concentrate on assembling the tail section of the plane, which for me is going to include installing the elevator and the rudder, and also the tail wheel wire. And that's what I'm gonna concentrate on this video. And then from there, I'll probably start doing the hinges. I was going to put on these decals, but I decided I'm going to go ahead and wait until I finish the plane to put the decals on last. So I'm going to hold off on those. All right, so I'm going to put this in here. This. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a Sharpie, and once I get it all lined up, I'm going to just I'm going to trace the contact with the fuselage, and then I'm going to go back and use that as my line. I'm going to cut off the monokote so that I can have the wood exposed. I can't glue this as is with the monokote, it's just not going to hold. So I'll get it lined up and then I'll trim the monokote off. Okay, well, it's going to be a little bit tricky to do on camera, but I'm going to take my ruler and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to measure from the fuselage to the tip out here, and I get about 8 3/4, a little over 8 3/4. And then I can kind of flip this side over, and I can do the same thing. And I can see here I'm like 8 1/2, so I'm really off on there. So I'm going to have to go ahead and move this way a little bit. Try to get it lined up. Push it straight in. I mean, it really has a nice fit, and so it's going to be kind of easy to do this. So now I'm at 8 5/8 on that side, and I'm 8 1/16 over 5/8, so it's a little bit off. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make these adjustments and get it lined up. I'm not going to do a lot on camera, and then we'll go ahead and we'll make our marks. Okay, so I measured from both edges or both points on the elevator back to the fuselage, and I got that those are exact on both sides. Well, exact as close as I'm going to get them. Now another way to do it, or another additional step I did, and I don't know if I can get this on camera very well, but I'm going to go ahead and measure from the very top of the firewall, or the front of the firewall in the corner, to the front tip of the elevator, and I get just a little less than 30 inches. Now I'm going to try to do that on this side now. And I've already did this, so I know I have it, but let me just put this down here. So again, going from here to right to the front corner, or the front tip of the elevator, again, just about 30 inches. So this thing is lined up really well, or really good for now. And I'm going to mark it carefully. I don't want to hit it on something because then I'll get it unaligned. I'm going to use this Sharpie, and I'm just going to draw my line on here and here. Now anything you draw, like if you use ink pen like a Sharpie on your monokote, or if you use paint or things, you can take it off with like acetone. And in fact, when I glue this on, I'm going to use epoxy, and it's going to get a little bit messy, and I'll clean off that extra epoxy using the acetone also. This stuff's kind of dirty. I've been using it for other things, but acetone's a good way to clean it off. I think you can also use alcohol, and that won't hurt the monokote. All right, so now we have our elevator marked, and so there we go. Let's see if I can get that. Does it show up on the camera? Maybe hard because of the lighting. I'm not sure here. Anyhow, it's right here. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, well for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a brand new X-Acto blade, and I'm going to gently cut the monokote along my lines, and I'm going to cut them just on the inside of my lines. And the reason I'm going to do that just on the inside is because when I put this on, I don't want to see the wood. When I don't want the wood exposed, so if I cut this too wide, if I cut it beyond the line on the outside of it, I'll have a little strip of wood showing. I don't want to do that. I can get my monokote and cover it back, but I kind of want to avoid that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it just on the inside, and I'm also going to be careful. I'm not going to jam this thing in here and cut it off because I don't want to weaken the elevator. So I'm going to do this very carefully. I'm just going to try to just trim it off gently. That. Now, one thing I've never done is, and I think it's common to way to do it, is people assemble the tail section, and I think people cover the monokote afterwards. And I have no problem doing that. It's just the way I've done this. I find this to be a little bit cleaner and easier when I'm kind of covering everything. It makes covering easier to do it this way, but then I have to do this. So I guess we all have to kind of pick the way we want to do it. Okay, so I have this done, and I left my line in here, like I said. Now, the good thing also about leaving the line in there is that now I can just use those lines to line it back up on the fuselage when I go to glue it in. All right, so the other thing I'm going to check for is that make sure that the elevator is perpendicular with the fuselage the best we can. Now, a good way to do that, and there's a couple ways of doing this, but for this model, because it's small and I can kind of work it this way, I can just go ahead and measure off the table. I'm going to assume that the fuselage is built square, and I'm going to push this down here, and I'm just going to go ahead and check. And what I did is I checked the sides. I checked the back and kind of like I did before, and I got about 1 inch for this one. No, I'm sorry. You got 7/8 for the back and 1 inch for the front. Okay, right, like when I measure it that way. And then when I measure this one out here, I have 7/8 on the back, and I have, 7/8 on the back, and a little over 1 inch on the front. And this one was what? Oh, it's about the same. So it's about 1 inch and a 1/16 on the front, and then 7/8 on the back. So there we're kind of, again, it's just because the kit is such a nice kit, it's designed to be put together nicely. So the fit back here is just really great. So I don't have to make any crazy adjustments. Now, I've had planes where you do have to make adjustments, and since we don't have to worry about that, I won't talk about that now. But there's ways of getting things lined up. But so for right now, this is really good. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use 30-minute epoxy. I'm going to take this out. And I'm going to put my 30-minute epoxy on here and put it on, and we'll let that cure. And with the 30-minute epoxy, I'll have time to kind of get it in there, line it up again, do my last measurements, and then just let it sit. And then we're done with that part. Okay, what I did is I put this blue tape along just on the outside of my lines, and this is just to help minimize the epoxy when it gets on, on the monokote. If I can keep it to the minimum, that's better. Like I said, if it does get on here, and it's going to, I'm going to have to just get acetone and clean it off. But here's the deal. I want to get a really good bond with this, and it's not about the monokote, it's about the bond of the wood, and we can come back and clean up the monokote later. Okay, so we are ready to roll on this. I'm going to go ahead and put some just in here. All right, here we go. Carefully slide this in here. Okay. So off camera, I took some time and I just made sure everything was aligned properly. It took a little bit of, I measured, like I said before, I measured the same measurements. I used my lines, and then I measured from, again, the front, my kind of arbitrary points. So as long as you do stuff like that, if you measure from arbitrary points and everything's equal, then you're good to go. So now this is just ready to cure, and we're gonna let this sit, and then we'll come back and we will put on the vertical stabilizer, the rudder. Okay, well, I'll let this sit for a while, and actually overnight, and so now it's all cured and nice and strong. All right, so what I need to do is I want to make sure that the fin and the rudder is obviously perpendicular to the elevator, and also lined up with the center line of the airplane, and also, you know, perpendicular to the wing. And the way I'm going to do that for this particular build is I'm going to use my table as a reference frame, or just a reference base. So my table is pretty darn level, as you can see here. So, and the plane itself, I'll put this right on the plane here, is when I put the plane on top of the table, here it goes, it's pretty level also. So that tells me that I can use the table as a reference, and which is basically saying I can use this level, I can put my level on here and line it up this way, use the level itself to help line up the fin, and then glue it on. So that's basically how I'm going to do this. Other ways to do this, and I'm still going to check it, is also to do things like, you know, measure from, you know, the tip of the elevator to the tip of the rudder. Those should be equal distances, things like that. So there's a variety of ways of doing this. You just have to kind of figure out the best way for the particular build you're doing and your situation. But that's how I'm going to do this. So I have a bookend. This is pretty heavy, and I'm going to gently put this on the plane back here somewhere to hold it down, and that's going to keep it nice and sturdy, because I don't want this to move too much. It moved a little bit. I'm going to do one more bookend. Let's see if I got another one over here. There we go. So I'm going to use these weights to sort of hold the plane down. And first things first, I'm going to go ahead and put my epoxy on the inside. And I cut a little strip off the monokote right here so that I can have a nice glue contact with the rudder on the front part of it. Put some in here now. All right. Slide that in here. Boom. Now, because we have 30-minute epoxy, I have lots of time to get the rudder, get it lined up. All right, so now what I'm going to do, and this is why I put the weights on here, because the way I'm going to do this one is I'm going to take a nice long strip of tape, and I'm going to put it, just going to gently, I'm going to put one on this side. Okay. I'm going to drape it over the top of this. I'm going to put another one on this side. Cut this back like this. Boom, like that. And all I'm going to do now is use this guy. I'm going to move this guy. I'm going to move it with the tape to where it needs to go. Just like right there. Okay, like that. Check it here. Okay, so this level's kind of heavy, so I want lighter one to be okay. But, all right, so what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to take that off camera because I'm going to have to just kind of monkey around with this a little bit, is I'm going to use this level, and And I'm going to do what I'm doing here. I'm going to use the tape, so the tape is going to be able, I can move the tape, and then the rudder is not very heavy, so the tape is going to hold it. Once I get it lined up, the tape is going to hold it until it cures, so that's good. All right, so I went ahead and I took a little bit of time, and I just made adjustments with the tape to hold it in the right place. I did use the level to help me get it. I found it to be a little bit too heavy and cumbersome, so what I did is I'm kind of, probably even actually a better way to do this, is I just measured from, I don't want to hit the plane, but I measured from the tip of the plane to the, so from the elevator tip to the tip of the rudder, and I just made sure that I had an equal distance between those on both sides, and it came out to like 11 3/4 from the tip to the top, and then the same on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and let this sit, obviously, and it's going to cure, and then we'll come back and we'll move on to the next step, which is going to be to put the tail, probably do the hinging and put the tail wire, tail gear in. So this sat for a little while, for about 3 or 4 hours, and now I'm going to go ahead and take this tape off of here and take a look. Now I know I'm going to have to go back with my iron after I kind of get this thing all assembled and check some of my monokote areas, because you know, after your first run or two of doing the monokote, it does sort of like relax a little bit, so you got to kind of hit it again. So I'll go do one final iron treatment toward the end. Let me pull this off of here. All right, so there we go. So we got this, got our elevator and our rudder, at least the stabilizers for the tail section, mounted and nice and sturdy. So my next step is, what I got to do is, the way this is going to work is when I put the tail, I have to kind of do this all together. I'm going to put the tail wheel in, the wire in, and then I'll mount the rudder onto that. So the first step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make my slots for my hinges. I'm not going to glue the hinges on. I'm not going to glue on the control surfaces yet, but I'm going to slot them so I can put the hinges on, and then I'm going to go ahead and then we'll bend the tail gear wire and we'll work with that. Okay, so I've decided I'm going to use CA hinges for this build, and I have this CA material here, fabric, and this is 2 inches wide. And I did some measurements, and I came up with probably the size I'm going to use is going to be about they're going to be about an inch. They're going to be about 1 inch long and about 1 inch wide, almost pretty much 1 inch square. Okay, so I decided that I need to have 4 hinges for the elevator, 2 hinges for the rudder, and at least 3 hinges for each aileron. I may go 4 hinges on that, but and again, they're going to be 1 inch long and probably a little bit less than 1 inch wide. And I'm going to go ahead and just cut right down the middle 1 inch wide strip. I'll just go ahead and do this. There we go. And then let's see here. I don't think 1 inch wide it's probably too wide. So I'm going to go, yeah, I may go about 5/8. Okay, so I have all my hinges cut, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the corners of each one, and I'm just going to trim off a corner all the way around. This, boom, 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 like that. And that just makes it so that it's easy to slide in. The corners don't get hung up. So I'm going to do that to all these, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so I got all of my hinges prepared. So this is one time when cutting corners is okay, right? Okay, so I got a bunch of those ready. So the next step, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just start on the rudder. Okay, so I marked on my rudder where I want to put the hinge, and I marked the outside, sort of a little bit beyond the outside, and then the center, and that's where I'll create the slot for the hinge. But before I do that, for these CA hinges, a good thing to do is to drill a small hole right down the center on both sides. And by doing so, that sort of allows the CA glue to sort of helps it soak in better. If you have that hole in there, it'll help it soak in deeper, and that's what you want. So I'm going to go ahead and drill a couple little holes in here, just using my pin vise. I gotta be careful here. There we go. Yeah, so I'm just going to drill this through here. I gotta be careful so I don't drill through have the drill come out. That's good. Do this side. Okay, cool. And then I can just slot this now. I'm going to be very careful here. Working with X-Acto blades is always a little unnerving when you're doing stuff like this. You slip, you cut your finger. I've been to the emergency room twice as a result of having an accident with an X-Acto blade during model building. One time I drove an X-Acto blade into my thigh by accident because I was pushing down too hard and the table kind of broke. And another time I was cutting something and I slipped and I filleted my finger. In fact, you can kind of see that scar on there. I'm not sure if you can see it right here. So be very, very careful with X-Acto blades, or any blade for that matter. Okay, pull the hinge out. Slides in there. Okay, good. Okay, so there we go. There is the hinge. And I'll do this, I did this side here, and I'll do this for all this stuff, and I'll do it off camera. But that's the basic process. So once I get these all kind of slotted, then we'll be ready to glue them on, and we'll move on to the next step for that. All right, so I've got my hinges slots cut from on my rudder, and I have my same thing on this on the vertical stabilizer. I always call it a vertical stabilizer, fin, whatever. And so this will fit in here, hopefully. A little bit of a trial run here, just like that. So now we got our, I'm not going to glue it right now, but that's going to be good like that. And then of course, so now you can see, so what's going to happen here with the tail gear wire is it's going to come up through here, and it's going to bend and go into this tube, and then obviously when the rudder is moving, it's going to move the tail wheel with it. So the next step for that though is to flip this guy over, and I have to set I got to figure out where I'm going to put the tail gear bracket. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the wire that came with the little tail gear kit, and I'm going to stick it in here. That, and that's going to line it up for me. And then again, I can just mark this. I am going to cut the monokote away from this also, because I do want to, not only do I want to screw it on, but I also want to put a little bit of epoxy on that. So here's kind of my marks right here. So all right, so I'll trim the monokote off of that, and then I can epoxy this down and screw it down onto the fuselage. All right, so I went ahead and I removed my my monokote right here, and I put in 3 little pilot holes, or not really pilot holes. I just put some little indentations there to help guide the screw when I place it on there. And then again, I'm not going to use this piece of wire that came with the bracket because it's not long enough, but I'm going to use it to help me line it up, or to keep it aligned, I guess, as I put this on here. So I'm going to put this on like that. So first I got to put some epoxy on it, and then we'll just screw it on and let that set up. All right, so I got my epoxy here. Put a little bit. Not too much. Put this over here. And I'll just use my wire here. Get it on there like that. Okay, now I got my screws. And I'll put these in. Get that one in a little bit later. Okay, so there's the wheel bracket mounted now. You can see that hopefully in there. All right, so this will now you can see the how it's going to work, starting to come together. Let's pull this out of here. And then what I have is I have a longer piece of the piano wire, which I'm now going to bend to come through here and then out in this angle, and then we'll put the tail wheel on. Okay, so I'm going to bend. First, I'm going to bend this section here. Now, what happens is the the piano wire just slides into the tube, and it's just in there freely. I don't connect it or anything. It just slides within that tube. So I need to make it long enough to where obviously it's not going to pop out. So I'm going to make it probably, I don't know, a couple inches long. And this is a little bit greater than this 90-degree angle. So I'm going to have to just estimate, and then I'll go back and I'll check it. So I'm going to go ahead and bend this. I want it to be pretty sharp if I can. So something like that. I'm going to have to kind of eyeball it. Yeah, so I got to go a little bit more. I can always bend it back out if I go too far, but kind of like to get it close. I guess I could have measured that angle, but so there we go, getting a little bit more. Somewhere around there. So I'm going to check that. So I'm going to pull this off of here. Push it through here. That, boom. So it goes like that. Okay, so I think I got the wire bent correctly to the right angle. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because it's lower, because it's slanted. I have to kind of bring this up, kind of slide it up into here. There we go. There you go. See how that worked? Nice. So now the wire, I don't know if I can turn it with my, yeah, so now the wire, this is going to bend for the tail wheel. Okay, so what I have to do now is I will go ahead and I'll glue the CA the hinges on, and then come back and bend the wire for the tail wheel correctly, and then we'll be done with that. And then I can put the elevator on here. Okay, for the CA hinge, what you want to do is go to the middle, find the middle spot, and just put a pin through the middle of it. And I'll do that one on there, and I'll do this one also. And what this does is this sort of helps you know where the middle of the hinge is. So when you put it in here, you'll know not to go too far. And it also creates a little space for you. So when you're lining up the hinges on the other piece, you still get the pin kind of gives you that little bit of gap that you need. So those are going to be just like that. And then we put this on our tail section, like we just did. There we go. And see, so those pins sort of help you keep a little gap right there. I mean, obviously you can eyeball it and be okay that way too. So those are there. Now I just need my CA glue. And this is one of the times when you do actually should use a little applicator, like one of these, so that you can get it kind of precision on there. So what you want to do, or at least what I do, is to probably drop about 3 or 4 drops on each side. Oop, I should take this out of here. Same thing over here. There. Now I'm going to flip her over and do one there. Oops. Oh boy, kind of made a mess. It's all right. Let that sit in there, and then what you want to do is kind of move it, let it set up there. Okay, so the CA dried, and I just have to work with it a little bit, and boy, that's pretty nice. Okay, so now I can work on bending the tail gear, or the tail wheel wire, to the right shape. It's going to be a little bit harder now because you know, piano wire is pretty stiff and it's hard to bend, and I want to make sure I don't damage the plane as I bend it around. Okay, so the tail wheel bracket kit came with this little collar, which is for the wheel, but I got an extra one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one collar here. And what that does, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. This. So what that does is it prevents any stress from, you know, when the airplane hits, it's not going to push up on the rudder here. The collar is going to help protect it. So that's kind of where that's going to go. And then I have this older wheel that I'm going to use as my tail wheel. So basically I have to just sort of bend a shape like that out of this. And it's not too hard to do, I just have to be careful because I don't want to damage the plane. Sometimes you can do that when you're bending things. I'm actually going to move this little collar over this way like this. So by having that little collar on there also, I can grip onto that with a plier, needle nose, and I can bend this over. So I got to make sure, hopefully I get it lined up with the rudder. Hold this very tightly. Okay. So that gave me my just a rough angle. I can always bend that later. And now what I have to do is I have to put a little dog leg in it, so then I can offset, so the wheel will be offset and then it'll be centered along the axis of the rudder. So let me do that. Somewhere about there. Then this guy is going to be about here. Of course, I can mess with this later, kind of make adjustments to it. The problem with piano wire is that you can only bend it so much before it breaks because it's kind of a brittle wire. And the problem with this setup is if it breaks, then I'm kind of got a problem because it's secured into the rudder. So I'm gonna have to twist this a little bit. Take this off of here. There we go, like that. And then I'm gonna have to cut this piece off now. I need to give myself enough room for a collar on there. So right now I'm just gonna put it right about here. Okay, like that. Okay, so I played around with this for a little bit and just to get things lined up, and you can see there it is, right? Now the I realize this looks kind of long. I may have done a little bit on the long side, but then this, now the next step will be to put the elevator on. Should be like this, and that'll finish up the tail section for us. And then you can see here, cut my finger, but you can see here I just put a little collar on the outside, and I put sort of like a little retainer. I use a little piece of tubing and a washer just to give me a retainer on the to help the wheel from kind of sliding up against the wire here. And at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to make adjustments to this anyhow, because once I get it out in the field and I start flying with it and taxiing it around, I'll probably have to bend this to make adjustments to make sure the plane, you know, tracks straight. So we'll just leave it like that for now, and we'll do that later. Okay, so I've slotted the elevator and the horizontal stabilizer, and let me see, this is going to be the top of my wing to the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and put my CA hinges in here in the slots, using my pin as a kind of a guide to the center, like that. Okay, so I'll put these in. All right, so now I'm going to try to fit it into my elevator here. Gonna have to do a little bit at a time. There we go, that's in there. So now we'll get our CA glue. Put on there. Start here. CA hinges are actually really easy to work with. I think they're easier than the nylon kind of mechanical hinge. It's nice. Sometimes I worry that over time the hinge is going to get brittle, but for now it's good. Okay, so there we go. That's glued on. And get my little. And as I mentioned before, if you have a little jar of acetone, you can save your little applicator tips. Just drop them in there and let them just soak, and they'll come out really clean. You've got to fish them out with a pair of tweezers or something, and then you can save those and use them again. Okay, well, there's the finished tail section and the tail wheel assembly on the bottom there. I think it came out pretty well. You can see the control tubing that is sort of hidden with the monokote, and the connections down here. And the rudder and the elevator are nicely secure now with the CA hinges. So the next step on the tail section, which I'm not going to do till later, is put the control horns on and the control rod, which goes to the servos. But that's not going to happen until we get toward the end of the build. So thanks for watching. I appreciate you hanging in there with me and watching this entire video if you did, and we'll see you next time.